A Bedouin teenager stands on the jagged limestone cliffs above the Dead Sea, baking in the dry heat of a spring afternoon, and which to discard, binding together a library of 66 books by sheer administrative coincidence. But if you look closer at the numbers woven into the earliest texts, this design is impossible to ignore. It is the exact phrase Isaiah uses to bridge the gap. If you are organizing a vast library of 39 scrolls of ancient law, poetry, and prophetic warning, how do you signal that a completely new era has arrived when you finally pivot from the crushing weight of judgment to the impossible offer of grace? How do you open the 40th book? You start with a voice in the desert. Look at the New Testament. The very first events recorded in the Gospel accounts, the beginning of the 27 books of the New Covenant, introduce a wild man standing in the muddy currents of the Jordan River. You can feel the rough scratch of camel's hair against his skin. You can hear the crack of his voice echoing off the water as he shouts at the religious elites coming down from Jerusalem. John the Baptist is the physical hinge of human history, and when the priests cross the river to ask John to identify himself, he does not hand them a genealogy. He quotes a specific prophet. "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord." Where does that specific declaration come from? It comes from Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3. Consider the sheer mathematical precision of this moment, at the mathematics of the prophets. At the scrolls buried under the sand, you start to see something the political reading completely misses. The Old Testament contains exactly 39 books. The New Covenant begins with book number 40. The scroll of Isaiah contains 39 chapters of heavy, relentless judgment. His dramatic pivot to grace and redemption begins exactly in chapter 40. And the exact words that open the 40th chapter of Isaiah are the exact words used to announce the New Testament era in the Gospels. This is not a literary coincidence engineered by medieval monks. It is a sovereign watermark woven directly into the fabric of the text. The structure of the scripture is preaching the exact same message as the vocabulary of the scripture. The transition from the Old Covenant to the New is mirrored perfectly in the transition from Isaiah 39 to Isaiah 40. The 66 chapters of the prophet contain the entire 66-book blueprint of the biblical library. But skeptics will immediately point out a historical fact. Chapter divisions were not added to the Bible until the 13th century by Stephen Langton, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Critics argue that Isaiah did not write chapter 40 at the top of his parchment. And historically, they are entirely correct. The numbers we use to navigate the text today are a relatively late addition to the manuscript tradition. If the chapter divisions were a late human invention, does the pattern fall apart? That is exactly what scholars wondered. The number 66 is not an accident of history. It is the signature of an architect. It is the exact number of chapters in the book of Isaiah. When they pulled that massive 24-foot scroll out of the Qumran caves in 1947, did the original Hebrew scribes, writing more than a century before the birth of Jesus, recognize a hard structural break between the first 39 sections and the final 27? The answer is etched right into the animal skin. The scribe finishes the final word of what we now call chapter 39. He lifts his reed pen. The black carbon ink dries into the rough sheepskin. You can smell the soot and the bitter gall of the ink. For 39 sections, he has recorded the heavy, suffocating warnings of a holy God. He has written of war. He has written of a city burned to the ground. He has written of an exile that will strip his people of everything they own. But as he prepares to write the 40th section, the scribe pauses. He does not move to the next line. He leaves a gap. If you look at the physical parchment of the great Isaiah scroll today, housed behind thick glass in Jerusalem, you can see the anomaly with your own eyes. You can trace the uneven stitching of the leather panels. You can see the tight, rhythmic columns of Hebrew consonants. And, at the exact juncture between the end of judgment and the beginning of grace, the ancient scribe left the bottom of the column completely blank, acting as a perfect microcosm of the entire biblical library. But the pattern does not start there. This specific number, 66, acts as a hidden axis. He started the new message of comfort on a brand new page. He forced a physical pause into the material. The medieval chapter numbers were not there, but the division was already carved into the skin. The gap is not a scribal error. It is a theological monument. It is the physical representation of the silence between the Old and New Testaments. It is the deep breath taken between the crushing weight of the law and the sudden, blinding light of the Incarnation. 39 sections of judgment on the left side of the gap. 27 sections of comfort on the right. 66 in total. This is not an accident of human administration. It is the signature of an architect. Look at the structural rhythm we have traced. 66 people walking down into the dust of Egypt to form a covenant nation. 66 days of waiting to bring a bleeding mother back into the light of the sanctuary. 66 books, acting as a Canon, a straight reed, measuring the truth in a chaotic world. 66 chapters hiding the exact blueprint of the biblical library centuries before the library existed. This is a mathematical thread pulled tight across thousands of years, running through the ancient narrative. It surfaces in moments of profound transition. It appears in the mathematics of purification. It was woven by dozens of different authors, men who lived centuries apart, men who spoke different languages, men who died on different continents under different empires. And yet, they all built to the exact same measurements. They did not orchestrate the mathematics. They were simply holding the pen. But seeing the blueprint of the scripture is only half the revelation, because the architect who structured the book is the exact same architect who is structuring your life. If you are in a season where the details of your life feel entirely random, look at the mathematics of this text. It is so easy to look at the scattered fragments of your own history, the broken relationships, the sudden geographical shifts, the cold glow of a phone screen at 3 in the morning, when sleep refuses to come, and assume that nobody is holding the pen. We look at the chaos and assume our lives are just a series of administrative accidents. We assume the waiting is pointless. But the 66 chapters of Isaiah demand a different perspective. The silence you are experiencing right now is not a mathematical error. It is a necessary gap. Think about the physical space the ancient scribe left on the Qumran parchment. It binds the structure of the text together centuries before the printing press was even imagined. To see the blueprint, you cannot look at a modern book. He stopped writing the heavy, suffocating words of judgment. He left the rough animal skin completely blank before he began to write the new words of comfort and grace. If you are standing in a gap right now, a space between what was broken and what has not yet been healed, between the loss of an old identity and the arrival of a new one, you are not forgotten. You might feel the physical, dull ache of waiting in your chest, but that waiting is measured. God is not abandoning the narrative of your life. He is simply pausing the pen before the pivot. Remember the 66 days of the bleeding mother in the book of Leviticus. You might be carrying a wound that feels like it is never going to close. You might be sitting outside the camp, metaphorically speaking, watching the thick smoke rise from other people's altars, wondering when your period of isolation will finally end. But the days in the desert are counted by a God who pays attention to the fractions. The period of purification has a precise expiration date. Remember the Canon, the straight river reed used by the ancient stonemasons. When your life feels like it is collapsing under its own weight, when the masonry of your career or your family seems out of alignment, the instinct is to panic. You have to step back into the ancient world. You have to find the very first time this exact number is recorded in the text. But the God holding the reed knows exactly where the boundary lines fall. He is not making up the architecture of your redemption as he goes. The architect who orchestrated the 66 people going down into Egypt, the 66 days of healing in the desert, and the 66 books of the Canon does not lose track of the timeline. He does not lose track of the days you spend in the dark. The text is holding up a measuring reed to your own experience, proving that what feels like chaos is actually heavily supervised construction. Because when you trace this specific number from the dust of Egypt all the way to the end of the world, you realize something profound about the God who engineered it. 66 family members walked into the dust of an Egyptian famine, and a covenant nation emerged. 66 days isolated a bleeding mother in the wilderness, and she stepped back into the sanctuary light. 39 scrolls thundered with the heavy weight of the law, and 27 arrived with the water of grace. An ancient scribe left the bottom of a leather column completely blank and proved the transition was already planned. And that first mention does not happen at a council of bishops. It happens on a dusty road leading down. A wild prophet stood in a muddy river quoting the 40th chapter, and the new covenant began. An early church applied a straight river reed to a chaotic world, and exactly 66 books met the standard. A sprawling library, written across continents over thousands of years, and one perfect structure holds it all together. Same numbers, same architect. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the gap. The blank space at the bottom of the column, on that ancient scroll in Qumran. Not the heavy black ink of judgment, not even the soaring words of comfort. The empty leather in between. The physical pause carved into the animal skin, proving that God does not rush a transition. If you are in a season where you are stuck in the gap, where the old chapter has ended and the new one has not yet begun, do not panic in the blank space. The architect has not abandoned the manuscript. If this opens something up for you, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like their life is out of alignment right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, into the famine of Egypt, with a broken family carrying a destiny they do not yet understand. And may the God who counts the days of your healing, who measures the boundaries of your life, and who writes the end from the beginning, meet you in the quiet gap of your own story and show you that He has been holding the pen the entire time. For centuries, the story of how the Bible came together has been told as a political drama and throws a stone into the darkness of a cave. He is not looking for a revelation. He is looking for a stray goat. We are told to picture bishops at the Council of Carthage in 397 AD, gathering in basilicas with cold marble floors, arguing over the scratch of ink on parchment. The popular narrative suggests that a group of men simply voted on the divine, deciding which texts to keep and which to burn in the fires of orthodoxy. But the reality of the canon is far more organic and far more ancient. The 66 books were not a sudden administrative decision. They were a slow, undeniable recognition, and the first time that specific number is etched into the biblical record. It has nothing to do with books at all. Genesis chapter 46, verse 6. Jacob is an old man, standing in the dust of a severe famine, looking at the heavy wooden wagons his lost son Joseph has sent from Egypt. His entire family is about to migrate. They are leaving the land of promise to survive the starvation of the present. And right at the threshold of this massive geographical and spiritual shift, the text pauses the narrative to give us a highly specific, mathematically precise headcount. All the persons belonging to Jacob, who came to Egypt, his own offspring, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. Why pause a gripping narrative to calculate this exact number? Moses, the author of Genesis, was raised in the courts of Pharaoh. He understood the administrative power of a census, but instead of the bleat of an animal, he hears a sound that will alter the course of modern history. The sharp, hollow crack of shattering pottery. But he is not writing a tax document. He is writing theology. In ancient Near Eastern literature, numbers are rarely just demographics. They are theological markers. These 66 individuals are the seed of Israel. They go down into the dark, crushing pressure of Egyptian slavery. As a small, fragile family, they will be pressed, broken, and enslaved, and they will emerge centuries later as a vast nation, carrying the law of God out of the desert. The 66 are the nucleus of the covenant. They are the exact blueprint of the people who will carry the presence of Yahweh to the world. When you look at it through this lens, the symmetry is staggering. The literal body of the people of God begins with exactly 66 members. Centuries later, the literary body of the Word of God will finalize with exactly 66 books. The first 66 carry the biological DNA of the promise. The final 66 carry the spiritual DNA of the fulfillment. It is a structural rhyme, placed at the very beginning of the nation's history, echoing forward to the end of the apostolic era. But the detail that makes this remarkable is what happens next in the Torah. Because 66 is not just the number of a foundational seed, it is the precise duration required to bring something clean out of something covered in blood. Inside that cave, sealed in tall clay jars and wrapped in linen, turned stiff and black with age, sit the greatest treasures the desert has ever yielded. A woman stands near the edge of the Israelite camp. The desert wind whips coarse linen against her legs. She holds a newborn daughter tightly against her chest. She is exhausted. She is bleeding. She is holding life. Leviticus chapter 12 sets the rhythm for this exact moment. God speaks to Moses from the tent of meeting. He outlines the laws of ritual purity. He lays down a precise timeline for a mother recovering from the trauma of childbirth. First, there are 2 weeks of strict separation. And then, a secondary countdown begins. Sunlight bakes the leather tents. Nights drop to freezing. The child cries in the dark. The mother heals in the shade. Water is drawn from the well. The camp moves through the wilderness. The cycle repeats. How long does this waiting period last? Leviticus 12, verse 5 gives the exact metric. And she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. 66 days. Not 60. Not 70. Exactly 66. Day 10 passes. Day 40 passes. Day 60 passes. The body slowly knits itself back together. The torn flesh repairs. The exhaustion lifts. And at the end of that specific span, everything shifts. Leather scrolls. One of them is 24 feet long, carefully stitched together from 17 strips of sheepskin. She walks toward the center of the camp. She brings a lamb for a burnt offering. She brings a pigeon for a sin offering. You can hear the panicked bleating of the animals. You can smell the sharp, metallic tang of blood hitting the base of the bronze altar. Smoke rises thick and heavy into the desert sky. The priest makes atonement. The woman is declared clean. She crosses the threshold. She steps back into the sanctuary. The 66 days are not a penalty. They are a purification. They are the exact distance between human frailty and divine presence. The bleeding stops. The isolation ends. The worshiper is completely restored. Look at the pattern building in the text. 66 people go down into Egypt to form the physical body of God's people. 66 days must pass to bring a bleeding woman back into God's holy presence. The number is a bridge. It connects the broken to the holy. It always functions as a vessel. It carries something fragile through a period of dark isolation until it is ready for the light. The physical nation and the physical body both move to the rhythm of this number. But the structure goes deeper than ancient genealogies and Levitical calendars. When scholars finally unroll it, breathing the smell of ancient dust, they find the entire text of the prophet Isaiah. To see the actual architecture of the Bible we hold in our hands today, we have to shift our focus from the Hebrew desert to the Greek world. We have to look at the language used to describe the collection itself. Because there is a detail hiding in plain sight, for 2,000 years, Christians have used a specific word to describe the complete collection of these 66 books. We call it the biblical canon, but what does that word actually mean? Look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 16. Paul is writing to a group of churches who are deeply confused about what it means to follow Jesus. They are adding human requirements to the gospel, and Paul shuts the argument down. He writes, "And as for all who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them." The word Paul uses for rule here is the Greek Canon. It appears only a few times in the New Testament, and its etymology reveals exactly how the early church viewed these 66 books. The noun form, Canon, comes from the ancient Semitic root quane, which translates literally as a reed or a stalk of grass, cut from the muddy banks of a river. In the ancient world, stonemasons did not have laser levels or steel tape measures. When building a wall, they needed an absolute standard of straightness to ensure the heavy-cut stones would not collapse under their own weight. Copied by hand more than a century before Jesus of Nazareth was born, it is completely intact, and it holds a structural secret hiding in plain sight. They used a canon, a piece of river reed, dried and cut perfectly straight, to measure the alignment of the masonry. If the stone matched the reed, it was true. If it deviated, it was torn down. Paul uses this exact same word in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. When he speaks of the measure or the province that God has assigned to him, he is talking about an unyielding boundary line drawn by God himself. If looking at the original language of the text is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the early church takes up the measuring rod. When the early councils looked at the hundreds of letters, fragile papyrus scrolls, and supposed gospels circulating in the ancient Mediterranean, they did not invent the Canon. They simply applied it. They held the writings of men up to the straight edge of apostolic authority. The Canon is not a cage designed by politicians to restrict human thought. It is a measuring reed designed to test reality. And when the testing was finished, exactly 66 books met the standard of the reed. The exact number of Jacob's seed going down into Egypt. The exact number of the days of purification in the desert. But the most staggering proof, most people assume the Bible we hold today is a product of human bureaucracy. They look at the 66 books, the divisions, the table of contents of this measuring rod is not found in the Greek New Testament. It is not found in a council decree from the 4th century. It is hiding in the structure of one specific Hebrew scroll, a single book that acts as a mathematically perfect replica of the entire Bible. A scribe sits in the dry heat of the Qumran scriptorium. The sun sinks behind the limestone cliffs of the Dead Sea. The air smells of soot and dried animal skin. He dips his reed pen into a clay inkwell. He presses the black ink into the leather. His fingers are permanently stained with carbon. He writes of Assyrian armies. He writes of broken covenants. He writes of fire. He writes of a coming king. He is copying the scroll of Isaiah. He does not know about the printing press. He does not know about medieval chapter and verse divisions. He only knows the rhythm of the Hebrew consonants stretching across the parchment. But he is writing a masterpiece of mathematical design. Fast forward to the modern Bible sitting on your desk. It has exactly 66 books. It is divided into 2 distinct testaments. The Old Testament contains 39 books. The New Testament contains 27. Now look back at the scroll of Isaiah. It contains exactly 66 chapters, and it fractures precisely where the Bible fractures. The first section of Isaiah contains exactly 39 chapters, and they assume this is all the result of a political council in the 4th century. They picture men in heavy robes arguing over which parchments to keep. Read them. They thunder with the weight of the law. They recount the rebellion of Israel. They detail the wrath of Yahweh. They warn of the coming Babylonian exile. They end in the dark. And then, chapter 40 begins. The final section of Isaiah contains exactly 27 chapters. Read them. The tone shifts instantly. The vocabulary transforms. These final 27 chapters read exactly like the New Testament. They introduce a suffering servant who takes the punishment of the world. They prophesy a man of sorrows. They offer water and wine without price. They promise the outpouring of the Spirit. And they conclude, in chapter 66, with the creation of a new heaven and a new earth. 39 of judgment, 27 of grace, 66 in total. Isaiah is not just a prophet in the Bible. He is the Bible in a book. The 39 and 27 split is not a medieval accident. It is a prophetic mirror. Long before councils debated the canon, long before the New Testament was even written, the architecture of the entire library was already encoded into the structure of this single scroll. The macrocosm is perfectly reflected in the microcosm, but the detail that proves